There he is.
Hey, Eric.
Hello,
Hey.
Mr. Cartabiano. Hello.
Hey, how are you? Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to
Ah,
have a quick conversation with us. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Fill me in a little bit on what it is, where you are, and what it is that you've got going on right now. Where are you? What are you doing?
well, I'm currently in lobby of our studio in the south of France. It's called ED Square. It's actually short for Toyota European Design and Development, and I've been here since January of 2018. I'm currently the president and design director of the studio, and it's just really great. It's a really great place to be. This studio, it says this year is our 20th anniversary. And so we've been in this location since, 2000. And we do advanced design and concept for both Toyota and Lexus for European focused models, but also Lexus global products and future of mobility and concept cars and advanced production and things you're going to see, things you have seen, and some things you'll never see, ever. Nobody will ever see some of these things that we do.
Yes, the reality of the auto industry.
Yeah. Well, there's worse places to be.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, it's always really interesting, like how many things that are actually taking place behind the scenes that you guys are, just trying to get your fingers on the pulse, trying out, and that we will never ever see outside of the studio. So no, but that's good. So thank you for sharing that. And so in your lobby down there, it seems like you have quite the set of model cars around you. I mean, there's probably quite a lot of cool stuff that you can talk about over there with us. But basically,
yeah.
if you wanted to share what it is that we're looking at in the back there, by all means, let us know what it is that we're looking at. I can see a 2000 over there in the corner. That is one of the all-time classics of classics right there in the back.
Yeah.
An amazing car, which I think you got to drive recently, didn't you? I saw a video of you tooling around in that thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, like I said, I'm sitting in the lobby. I mean, the main reason I'm sitting here because it's the best Wi-Fi signal in the building.
Yeah.
So there's a function for me sitting right here. But yeah, we just renovated the entrance to our building, and we finished it basically right before the lockdown in France, which was pretty strict in the beginning of March. So it's really nice to sit in this room. It's we haven't really used it that much. But before it was really sterile. It was like a hospital. And so what we wanted to do was fill it with our design work of our team members. So yeah, in the back you can see the 2000 GT there. That's actually that's something we put on display to show the skills of our modelers. So it's every technique that we can do in-house for the model. So there's clay, there's 3D print, there's 3D mill, there's rapid prototype, there's metal work, there's paint, there's woodwork. It's all on one 50% model, which is great. On our table behind me, that's actually it's the final study model for the Lexus LF30 concept car that we made for Tokyo last year. So this is actually this is a really rough 3D print model that we used as the form for LF30. It's hollow, and we wrap it with Dynoc silver tape. And this is a good example of what we do internally, how we sketch. And the red model is the speedform model of the new Yaris Cross, which was developed here at the original theme came from ED Square. And it's a quick polygon model that the designers make for the study. And then behind me is LF30, the final paint study model. It's a really beautiful model, and E-Palette, which is from CES 2018.
Right.
And so it just kind of, what we want to show in the lobby is the range of work that the designers do here to create the future for our company, and show that the designers have a really wide bandwidth of work. And I really love putting the artwork on display. And so the goal is, over the next couple of years, as more of our products come to market, we would fill the shelves with the stories that the designer created. So not just models, but color samples from our CMF team, sketches from the design team. We actually, way back there, we have some small study models from the CAD team and the clay team. So we want to bring the lobby to life, almost like it's almost like a library of cool artifacts. And you walk in, and Eric, if you ever come here, for whenever we can stop social distancing, if you come here and we have a real interview, we're going to plant some Easter eggs in the lobby. And if you can walk around and discover stuff, that's really a cool part of it.
Yes. Well, I was there last year, right? But
yeah,
it wasn't that lobby.
It didn't look like this.
Like that. No, it didn't.
Yeah. And right now we have the beautiful South France sunshine. That's actually the original Yaris model in our entryway. And
Nice.
the first Toyota Yaris was probably the most famous output from this studio, long before my time.
Yeah. Super successful product as well for the European market, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
So that's great to see your environment. Is that the viewing area then that you just showed us outside?
No, the viewing the viewing area is definitely off limits for today's conversation. Yeah. But it's the entry walkway. It's almost my favorite part of this building. There's two areas that I love, is the entryway, and for anybody who follows me on social media knows that I post endless amounts of photos from the entrance of this building, because I'm just, I've been here now for almost 3 years, and I still am amazed by the architecture of this building, and it blows me away. And then we have a terrace on the end of the building that overlooks the whole Mediterranean from Cannes to Monaco. So again, not a bad place to be in lockdown.
Yeah.
But the irony of being in such a beautiful place is, when you're really working hard on projects, you're inside all the time.
Right.
So, and everybody who works digital knows that you don't want reflections on the screen. So all the shades are down. Everybody has the black foam core around their computer screens. So it's, you only know where you are when you leave work.
Yeah, but that's important too, isn't it? I mean, you need to get out and you need to see things. And that is basically brings me to the reason why I wanted to have this conversation. Like, I wanted to find out, you are obviously president, you're the boss man over there at ED Squared. You're responsible for everyone that's working there creatively, under you. So you are now in the office, in the studio, which is, I presume, when did you go back, or are you still remote working? What's the situation like?
Well, the pandemic hit pretty hard here in Europe, and when it first started expanding in February, it was pretty stressful because there weren't any protocols in place to start working securely from home, with the top secret work that we do. And everything was developing really rapidly. And we had a model going on in Northern Italy at the time too. So, and we had staff in Northern Italy, so it was a little stressful. But we were able to come up with a unique system pretty quickly. The whole team really rallied around getting this done. And we started working from home the day France announced the lockdown. So the day that they announced the lockdown, we shifted the entire staff to home working. And we had a secure server set up for working at home. The designers had their tools at home. The modelers had a lot of research work to do. And so the timing worked out. And we've been home for about 2 months. And then last week, the lockdown in France started to ease. And the day after the lockdown, we started coming back to work. We had been working for the last month with a plan to reactivate the studio. Mm-hmm. And so we have a lot of security protocol in place for COVID-19. So I'm not wearing a mask now, but when we do have a meeting, we wear masks. We have a giant viewing hall where we have our meetings where we can practice social distancing. We have we don't have everybody back. Most of the clay team is back because we started a clay model. Most of the digital team is here because we reached a point where it was just too difficult to do advanced digital modeling remotely. Most of the design team and the administration team are still working from home. And we do come in a couple of times a week for team meetings. And we found that the working from home process, it was a rough start. But after a few weeks, it started to gel, and the creativity was really strong. I was really impressed by the design team here. The designers did a great job of really rising to this challenge. And we had 4 big projects going on, and the work was prolific. But, I think everybody was feeling it's about time to start trickling back. There's a point where working from home where individual projects are fine, but there comes a time when the group dynamic of creativity is really, it's really crucial to the project. And we found that the first day we got back, we had a group brainstorming session, and we were all socially distanced from each other. But what we were able to achieve in 3 hours was more than a week of discussing via Skype. And wow. So it's a really interesting mix right now. And so, yeah, I think we have about 40% of the staff daily in the building. The rest are working from home. And as the France lockdown is in stages, and as the stages progress, we constantly reevaluate where we're at. Mm-hmm. And if things proceed okay, we hope to have everybody back in the building by June, beginning of July, and fingers crossed that it goes smoothly. But it was a big leap of faith, home working. It's a gamble because, Eric, this profession, the creative profession, really, it really becomes productive when designers and modelers and the creators can talk together and throw ideas around and improve them. And you can do that to a point with Skype. I think it would work better if we all had the world's best internet and we had technology like the Avengers, but with a very slow Wi-Fi system in Skype, we have our limits. But it went well, and I think people are excited to come back to work. I am. I enjoyed working from home, but I also enjoy the collaborative process. Yes. A lot, and still get to do what I love to do every day. So,
no, I mean, I've heard of designers saying that they actually really enjoyed, working from home. Obviously, you save on the commute time. You're in isolation, so you can basically get on with your work and things like that. But there's also the mental aspect and also the teamwork aspect of being able just to kind of interact with people around you, which still, even though we're doing this right now, it would be far different if we were sat together in the same room, right? It's very different. And that, I think, because we're all social beings, we all, vibe off of one another essentially, right? We have it's really very difficult. So I was very curious as to how it is that you manage doing that. But clearly, if you were in between projects and you didn't need to have, physical properties that needed to be worked on, and you had your Wacom and your Cintiqs at home and whatever, obviously you can get on with that in the beginning. But then I think, like I said, we're all social creatures. We all feed off of one another, and the creative process is a collaborative one. So it's I would imagine, being part of a program, you should really be together. So I'm assuming it would have been quite difficult, especially as a manager, right? Having to run that organization and make sure that everything is
well, yeah.
good.
What's interesting is that, and we talked about this internally, is I found that I was talking more every day working from home. Like it would be in multiple days where you're 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Skype all day. And what you realize is discussions that you would have casually by walking up to somebody's desk or meeting at the coffee machine or talking at the model. You have to organize in an online meeting, and you end up talking all the time. And so I think really one interesting side effect of this whole work from home quarantine, because it was really strict here. You couldn't leave your house. You had a kilometer border basically limiting you. And but I think what it did is it made everybody's communication skills improve. Because everybody, including myself, you're laughing because here I am just rambling on, but everybody learned how to become more succinct in their presentation and what they wanted to say and getting to the point. And everybody got really great at very condensed and meaningful presentations that were easy to send over, in our server. And I really hope that we can bring this improved communication technique back to the studio when we're working in the building. So it's one of those little interesting side effects that you don't expect to happen, but it ends up happening.
Right. Yeah. No, most definitely. I mean, so one of the things I really wanted to talk with you about as well is, in light of all of this, pandemic and things, before this even happened, there was quite a big change taking place within the automotive industry, right? A lot of trends that were pointing towards certain things that I'd really like to, get your opinion on, obviously, because you're on. Is from Toyota, for example, showcased a lot of personal mobility, vehicles like the iReal, the iRoad three-wheeler thing that I really, really loved. So looking at those things and what's happening right now in terms of the pandemic, before all of this happened, we were talking electrification, right? One of the mega trends. We were talking autonomy, another huge trends. Then we were talking, shared mobility, right? And so now, when you look at it, right, do you want to get into a shared vehicle? Like autonomy, okay, electrification, fine, but the shared mobility thing, that's kind of dead in the water right now, right? No one's talking about that. It's like the resurgence of the personal mobility vehicle is coming back. And so I guess I just wanted to, in terms of these mega trends, do you see it affecting the way the projects and the proposals that you are going to be putting forward? I know the auto industry really plays the long game, so hopefully you're being more optimistic about it and say we're going to get out of this and it'll be business as usual and we're going to continue on the same tack. Or is this causing you to reflect on, hey, this is a real issue that's affected us and is still affecting us and could potentially affect us for a very long time? What are we going to do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm generally an optimist, so I think we'll come out. I hope the whole world comes out of this stronger. I think the industry will come out of this different, and I don't want to say stronger with the confidence that everybody will be okay. But I think, we're going to continue to create. Our R&D budget is still strong. Our company really sees investment in the future as a priority, which is great for designers. It's really great for us. I'm very thankful for this company for being farsighted like that. I think it's interesting because we've started talking about the effect of the COVID-19, and we call the post-COVID-19 period, how that'll affect design and products. And there's really a wide range of opinions. I think there's going to be a drop-off in the shared mobility for a while. I think autonomy will continue to move ahead, especially with the ability of autonomous transport for 24/7 usage, especially with product delivery. Think about everybody's gotten used to home delivery of goods. That'll continue to grow. I think, and for me, an interesting side effect is I'm curious if EVs will continue to grow, which I hope so, because I think everybody's noticed how clean the air's been,
right?
How beautiful the environment has become in just a short time. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a stronger push to zero emission vehicles, whether that's EV, plug-in hybrid, or fuel cell. I hope we move to zero emission vehicles sooner. And when I see, when I was working from home and I would take my lunch break and I would walk outside and see how clear the sky was, it was amazing. And I think you'll start to see research that people have taken notice. So I think that type of forward thinking with what powers our vehicles will change. I think, I also think if things settle down and come back, I don't want to say to normal, but somewhat normal, there's going to be an urge to travel and move about again. So I think mobility, whether it's shared or personal, will grow. And I do think that personal space is going to come back into fashion.
Yes, very much. Yes.
And, I know the first day I could drive here, it was the best commute in my last 10 years. I got in my car, hybrid. I got in my car and I put the sunroof back and the windows down and I blasted the music. And my commute, I live in the hillsides here, so it's all country roads. And it was the best 23 of driving I've had in a long time. And
absolutely.
This is when driving is at its best.
Absolutely. There's no one on the roads.
There's no one on the road. But I think, the long game, you mentioned the long game, shared mobility is just a fact of what we're going to have to achieve. And it's how do we make it safe? And how do we think about hygiene of these vehicles? How do we clean them? How do you interact with them? How do you create distancing if it's going to still be needed? And in Europe, we're thinking about the future because a lot of the cities are changing. It doesn't really happen in the States, but in Europe, a lot of the cities are blocking off their central core zone to any that's not zero emission. And so what kind of vehicles can we design where mobility is still needed? I mean, a 2K distance is not so bad when you're healthy and you're walking, but if you still need to deliver a good into the center of the city, or you're elderly, or you have a disability, it's not easy. So mobility is still required. So I think all these things will be necessary. I tend to wonder from an aesthetic point of view, and this is what I hope, is that design-wise, it's optimistic, hopeful, and expressive. And I think you can see it historically after periods of human history where things have been tough. The aftermath is kind of an explosion of artistic creativity and expression. If you think about after World War I and the 1918 pandemic with the Roaring Twenties, or after World War II, the kind of flashiness of American optimism. and even the European Union and European design in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then post Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to see an optimistic design language that's forward thinking and really embracing the future. And I also think you'll start to see challenging design more. Because you think about it, there's been a couple months where artists, designers have been creating at their without managers like me micromanaging them, right?
Right.
And so maybe all this creativity that people had in their home office is going to bring their way back to work. And I'm really excited by it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So I am optimistic on the design side. I know the business is it's going to be difficult, and let's see what happens at the end of the year. But we've been through tough times before, and we'll get through it. And I know you asked me before this talk today. You asked me like, what must it be like for students right now? And I feel for them. I understand it, and we can talk about that more in a minute. But I just want to say that when I started Art Center, I'm really old now, so nobody's going to remember that
you and me both, man.
Remember that in the early 90s there was a pretty deep recession, and I still remember my first day at Art Center. The first class, the instructor said, just to let you know, none of you are going to get jobs. It was literally the first sentence from my first class at Art Center. And I'm like, oh shit. But this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And, things picked up, and, work hard and keep plugging away, and you can do it. I'll be kind of sitting in on an Art Center class this summer. So I think a lot of working professionals in the industry are trying their best to still give back to today's design students. And I'm going to try, my hardest to keep inspiring the young designers across the world today to, not give up.
Yeah. That's the key.
Still get this.
The thing is, it's we've talked about this before, but it's an extremely competitive industry, and if you want something bad enough, you really have to go for it and go after it. And right now, it is very challenging because there's companies that are folding, there's companies that are not accepting new applicants. They're actually trying to figure out what to do with the staff that they have on board currently, because there aren't as many projects. Everything's been affected in some way or another, whether it's an OEM design studio like yours or a supplier, consultancy that's not getting the projects that they're used to be working on. But there was one question that came in earlier from Robert Dooley, and he said he wanted you to define optimistic design and what that means. So
it's hard to design. I think what is I first of all, I think optimistic design is expressive. I think it's moving away from kind of conservative tradition, playing it safe. I think sometimes we get into eras where there's kind of the established tradition of this is what looks nice, right? And you play it safe, and it's a little bit of a defensive posture. So I think one part of optimism is being more expressive and taking risks. The other part is not falling into the trap that every vehicle should wall you off from the rest of the world, or not every vehicle is an armored expression of self-reliance or self-defense. I think that design can convey an openness to the world, and I think that could be really cool, honestly. Third thing is, I think just the joy and mobility. So whether it is a shared mobility product or a personal mobility product, or even, sports cars, I think and I hope sports cars will survive until there aren't any more cars, or even after cars. I still think sports cars will survive.
Right.
But, that kind of optimism that there's joy and freedom of movement. And whether it's a joy within a couple kilometers, or driving across Europe, or driving across Asia or Africa or South America or Montana, whatever the speed limit is there now. I think that type of optimism can be really cool. But yeah, basically, I think expressive design that's willing to take risks. And I really get I get excited. Nowadays in social media, you see a lot of the big difference between my day and my friends, our group's day, and today is there's an outlet for expression that's constantly online. And so a lot of my Instagram feed is car design stuff. And I see a lot of cool new things. But what I really want to tell everybody is I want to be more shocked. Honestly, I want to be more like surprised by stuff. Because as a director of design, when you're hiring people, the thing you're looking for is a young creative person who has an idea that you would never come up with yourself, because maybe, I don't want to say past our prime, but the expertise has kind of moved into a different era of long-term vision and planning and refinement and getting something to market. But when I look at the Pforzheim or Art Center or RCA or CCS, I'm really looking for the design that I look at it and go, wow, I never would have thought of that before. So to me, that's part of optimistic design too, that there is a future to look forward to. And I want to create a product that fits in that future, that breaks the mold. So that's it's kind of maybe it's an overly esoteric description, but that's how I would define optimistic design. And I think there's another really interesting thing in this whole lockdown era, and then the fact that design schools are having their classes from home, is I'm starting to see a lot more designers use polygon modeling, or whatever the software you want to use. I see a lot more modeling personal at home, which is kind of taken over clay in some ways. And I think that's really great, because I think a lot of the future of design is quick digital sketch modeling and 3D printing, and then realizing in clay. For example, that LF30 that's behind me.
Yes.
That process was it was hand sketch and then digital speed form sketching, printing out, looking at the shapes small, going back to sketch, then going back to 3D model, reprinting out, and then milling in clay, trying clay, scanning the clay, bringing it back in the data. And it was a really agile and fast process that really is really a strong point of a small independent design studio like us. Is you need to be agile and quick. And so the thing that's giving me hope is I'm seeing a lot of design classes where the students are quick modeling themselves, and the end products are pretty hot. So I'd be really excited to get a young designer in here who, they can hand sketch, they can digital sketch, they can digital model. I don't need anybody to do a super amazing alias model for me. I need somebody to do basically a study model in data, quick data, and I'm seeing it. So again, I'm optimistic about the future.
Yes. No, I mean, during this downtime. So basically, I was having a conversation with some students on Coventry's MA program recently, and we did a Zoom call, and I basically imparted some information about what they should be doing right now, given that they can't get jobs, they can't have their degree shows as they would traditionally, they can't interact with designers that are coming to see their projects. And so I think right now is a prime time to really be working on developing skill sets in
exactly
skill sets in software, learning something new, perhaps exploring a path that you wouldn't have done normally. Just getting out of your comfort zone perhaps a little bit and doing something a bit different. Like you said, everybody that I speak with, because obviously as well, I help people find jobs. And when I speak, about what people are looking for, it's always, especially from the younger generation, you guys are looking for ideas. You're looking for someone that can create the next, because they're in it, they're living, and they're at the cutting edge, basically, to create something that is different, compelling, interesting, and, insightful, perhaps, so I always give that type of advice to people, saying, hey, no one wants to see, what Lexus is doing now, because the guys thought about that 6 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, we're thinking about what Lexus is doing in 2030, so I need something beyond that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you mentioned the LF30, which is basically, there's reason to that name, obviously, and we talked about it at great length, and there's an article on my website as well. So if you guys are interested in reading more, there's a huge in-depth article about that on Form Trends. But just to kind of summarize, that was the 30-year of Lexus, looking at the year 2030, what could potentially be a compelling electric vehicle. And I think you guys did a great job with that car, just mainly because I love the package. I love the form language. It's very expressive. It's very avant-garde, as I mentioned as well when we had that interview. But I think if we're looking at something like that, that is perhaps optimistic, because it's showing, from a Lexus brand message, it's showing luxury. It's showing, incredible spaciousness at the rear. It's showing performance and drivability, which is something else, another kind of calling card from the premium brand. So it actually harnesses all of those different things in this quite atypical, very radical, wedge form of a concept. And so I thought that was a really great design that you guys came out with. There's, obviously I want to talk a bit more about how, this in the short term or in the long term is going to potentially influence design, what we're living through right now. And so I think from a Toyota, from a, perhaps not from a Lexus perspective, but perhaps so, I think it's really interesting to see the types of vehicles that, Toyota's come out with. As I mentioned before, some of these iReal and iRoad concepts. Do you perhaps see a company like Toyota, or indeed Lexus from a luxury end, kind of pivoting and offering something other than, traditional cars in after this? I mean, we saw a lot of companies kind of, change tack and start creating in their own factories, PPC and things of that nature. And I mean, is that kind of, because the automotive business is hard, I mean, it's a difficult one. And I guess from your perspective, where do you see that going? Is it just like, I don't know if it's going to continue to be business as usual, build some cars, sell some cars type thing?
Well, I think, our boss, who's, the name Akio Toyota, his name's on the front of the car. He really wants the company to transform into a mobility company. That was kind of the stated mission a couple of years ago, and it's still what we're aiming to do, because I think we realize that cars as they are will survive for the next couple of decades. But if you want a company to survive for over 50 years, you have to think long game, and mobility is part of that future. So one of the things I love about this studio is, we do things like the Yaris Cross and the, other Yaris and the other products that I can't talk about yet. But we also
out of your as well, the UX concept that came out before.
The UX before I arrived here. It's actually sitting in our viewing hall right over there. But mobility is a large part of what this studio works on. And it's really great because coming from the US to here, US, we worked on Concept I that was at CES 2017, and we worked on a lot of mobility, but the studio here really focuses on the future of urban mobility. CASE, you've heard of the term CASE before. So we're doing a lot of super hyper advanced concepts that try to redefine what cars are. And I wonder, maybe you can bear with me as I walk over here, because there's actually a case in point. So sorry, Maggie, I'm going to walk by you and violate all our social distancing protocols. But so, for example, these are models that we did they were also at the Tokyo Motor Show in 2019, and 6 of these concepts came from this studio, actually. So this interesting little car, this is actually, it was a vision of super personal mobility for Lexus. And the idea was that 2 of these vehicles could fit in a single car lane, so they would be allowed into central London. And the idea of the cabin was, it was built around Da Vinci's drawing of the man within the arc. And so this is actually the same proportion as Da Vinci's drawing. And so you could stand up in the vehicle and move around, which was really cool. And then additionally, so that vehicle was supported by this called the e-charger. And this was an autonomous drone that would follow. It was a fuel cell powered drone, and it will follow your vehicle. And if you have a subscription to it, it'll charge your vehicle, much like the way, for example, fighter jets are fueled by air tankers. And so this was a solution because in Europe, you can't easily tear up old cities and install an EV charging network. So how can you take advantage of the existing city grid, or lack of grid, and charge vehicles in an interesting and new way? And thanks, Saki. And then E-Racer. So this was also shown at Tokyo. This was done here. And this was the idea of a fully gamified future of sports car driving, where the sports car is at its pure essential nature, and the whole car would be 3D printed, and you could build it in your in your garage. But this was a future of sports. So, mobility doesn't have to be a pod. It can also be the joy of driving. And then finally, speaking of mobility, this was called the Care Share. So we also showed this at Tokyo. And this mobility project was thinking about the elderly that live in rural populations that don't have easy access to healthcare. And of course, we're seeing in the pandemic what that leads to. So the idea was mobility design, an autonomous vehicle that would provide medical services for the elderly, but also bring communities together, because we found that in rural societies, loneliness was a big problem. So I think what I'm trying to say is, good design and optimistic future isn't just about styling. It's the idea behind it, and why does design exist? And to me, that's really what design is all about, is about solving problems and finding solutions to problems that exist in today's and future world, and then wrapping it up, hopefully in a really beautiful shape that stands the test of time. So, hopefully everybody got an interesting tour of the lobby as I was walking around. I hope I didn't make anybody didn't give anybody motion sickness as I was walking around. So
no, I thought that was super interesting. It's nice to get an insight. As we said at the beginning of this, design and design studios it's always so secretive, right? There's always stuff that you can't access, and you never get insight on. And you mentioned, a few of those concept cars that you just showed us in model form were shown at shows, but then it's kind of like a flash in the pan, right? You see them at this show, and then, if you know what you're searching for, you could probably find it online, but then no one really remembers these. So it's kind of like, you go through it. It's a nice exercise in creativity, but then you kind of, lose track of that, or you go in a different direction. There was one of the things that you mentioned. There was two things that you mentioned just now that I want to touch on. One is the fact that you mentioned, mobility, sports cars, for example,
right.
are part of the mobility equation, because I think that is brilliant. Whether or not we can use them on public roads in the future remains to be seen, but it certainly is a joy, right? I think we're going to see a lot of autonomous vehicles that are going to be shuttling around, and the only way to really keep that driver error to a minimum is by putting a lot of autonomous cars on the road and taking off all of those cars that are driven by humans.
Yeah.
Point, then you're kind of taking your Citroen DS to a special closed off part of the Alps or what have you, in order to drive on. And like in Austria, you have these like passes that you have to pay for to get on, kind of like the Nürburgring. You pay an entry fee, and then you can go on and drive around on that road. And so I think that those types of things moving forward, where we can actually drive our vehicles on these private roads or on these toll roads, and all the rest of things like the 405, for example, which I know you're probably well familiar with.
Too familiar.
Is that's all autonomous, all like robot cars driving you to work.
Yeah.
There was the second thing that I wanted to bring up was there was a question here that came through a little bit ago. You're now in France, in Europe, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You're working on. I think one of the main reasons why ED2 exists is to act as a think tank for what's happening and to gauge future trends from a European perspective, because then you goes to Japan and you feed those to less so perhaps to California. But how do you I think the markets thing is what interests me probably the most, because it's societal, right? It's culture. It's what happens here in Japan is very different than what happens here in California or in Europe. And you mentioned this as well in terms of the grid, because if we start talking about autonomy, for example, it's really easy to do an autonomous system in New York where it's all like streets and avenues and and it's gridded, it's already done, right?
Yeah.
Or to set new infrastructure in a place like California, which has wide open spaces. How are you going to set up that type of infrastructure, right? In Rome, for example, right? It's just not feasible. So it's different problems and different solutions. So my question to you, when you look, how do you find being problems that you're encountering, the solutions that you're having to come up with in Europe versus what the issues or indeed the projects that you may have been working on when you were at Calty, because you were in Calty in California for a very long time.
Long time.
So tell us a little bit about that. What's the differences?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious differences. First of all, the size of cars. I have not worked on a large truck since I came here.
Right.
So that's one big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because the car I currently drive a Lexus RX here, which in America is definitely mid-sized. Yeah. And my car here is honestly, it's way too big. And so that's, size is a big difference here. And also, like I mentioned before, the restrictions in a lot of the cities that you want to travel to, they do exist. And so a lot of European cities, you park outside the central core and then you walk in or you take public transport in. And that central core is going to get bigger and bigger. So we have to design around that solution. Also, the CO2 risk targets are much more aware of climate change, I think, in Europe. And then, because CO2 tax here is quite high, and they really are trying to engage people into choosing zero to low emission vehicles. So, for example, Toyota and Lexus percentage of hybrid sales in Europe is something around 70 something percent. It's a huge take rate. And so that's also a big difference in Europe. And the programs for EV and fuel cell are quite favorable here. And,
Yes.
you see it. You see Tesla Model 3 sells amazingly well in Europe. So I think that's another difference. And then a lot of mobility solutions are really based on the makeup of the European cityscape. And you mentioned it. It's like in China, you can build an autonomous city from scratch. And Toyota, we're aiming to do it. Akio launched the Woven City at this year's CES. And it's such a cool concept. And it's at the base of Mount Fuji. And I think it's a really great trial into how to link everyday living with the future mobility. So when you can start from scratch, it's amazing. Here we have to work with, Paris, and you've been here, Cannes, and the small villages in between, and Rome and Florence and Barcelona and Madrid. And so we have to work with the infrastructure that we have, and it has its own challenges. And so how do you create mobility in a chaotic space? So, and again, where size is super important. And that's a big difference. And I think the one great thing about being moved to this studio was an eye-opener. And I lived in Japan for 2 years when I worked on Camry a few years back, which was also, it's a different type of eye-opener. But Europe really, I can really see why design is highly important here, because design and art has been part of the culture for thousands of years, and the space is small, so you're up close and personal with product, which I think is really interesting. And a lot of the cities, as kind of chaotic as they are, because there's a lot more Green Party representation, you see a lot more acceptance of government business partnerships to develop mobility solutions. And we have the Paris Olympics coming up in 4 years, so it's a good opportunity for this company, who prides itself on, again, becoming a mobility company, but also one of the main sponsors of the Olympics, to hopefully create something that can help society move during these global events. So for me, it's been such a wonderful experience. I really love working here, and I love the different viewpoints on things. And what's also been really great is, because we focus on mobility and experimental concepts, and we do advanced production that goes right to production. We don't do production at the studio. We have a sister studio in Brussels, ironically, where ED2 started, which is in Brussels, when it was called Epoch. So we reopened that studio, and they focus on the production. So we do concept advance to production, and then it moves to Brussels, and they finish it to line off. But being here, it's been really creative, and a little bit more chaotic artistic expression. The designers here really take risks and challenge the expected. And I'm always surprised by what the design team here comes up with. And I think within the global Toyota Lexus organization, whether it's ED2 or Calty or Lexus Design in Toyota City, or the Hachioji studio, or we have a studio in Melbourne, or Shanghai. I think the designers in this corporation are, they're just great artists and thinkers, and I'm proud to be part of this organization. And I wish people could see the artwork I see in the studios. Because we make products that people drive for a long time. Our products are reliable. They last forever. We're a corporation and people depend on us for safety, quality, dependability, reliability. That's our cornerstone as a company. So we make product, but behind that product is an artisan who created something from an idea in the back of their head. And if you could walk around these studios and see the artwork I see on people's screens or on the monitors or pinned up on boards, it's really inspiring. And it's why after I've been in this business for 23 years, I still love it. Every day it's exciting. And it is true, when you love what you do, your job is not a job, for better or for worse. It's also my hobby. So I end up thinking about work all the time because I love it. That's good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you. It's that's the old adage my father used to tell me as well. If you find something you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And it's true to a certain extent, because it's, you still got to put in the time and the effort.
There's a lot of time and there's a lot of effort.
But listen, Ian, I'm sorry to have to cut this short. Unfortunately, the clock is running down, and we've only 50 seconds left on this chat. But it's been extremely eye-opening, and always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And those that have asked questions, I mean, there are certain things that we didn't get to, and I do apologize for that. Maybe we can do another point.
If there's more questions, especially from students, I'm always happy to help students out. And my message to all the students around the world: don't give up hope.
Don't give up. Exactly. No, that's advice. And I think for everyone in this current situation now, it's let's remain optimistic, hope for the best, and keep doing what we do and keep doing what we love. So on that note, thank you so much, Ian. Have a lovely evening.